Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to today's 6 Degrees of Smart Manufacturing webcast. My name is Mike Yost, and I am the outreach leader at CESMII, the Smart Manufacturing Institute, and I'm happy to have you here with me today and also to have our guest, Tom Comstock from LNS Research. I will bring Tom in here in just a minute, and before I do, I just want to set the stage for today's conversation and a little bit of background about why we're doing this. Our goal with this webcast series is multifaceted. One is to keep it short and sweet and get as many voices as we can to weigh in on what smart manufacturing looks like to them. The manufacturing ecosystem that we represent, that we're all a part of, is diverse, and we have a lot of ways that we can connect and a lot of ways that we can learn from each other. And the idea behind this webcast series is that we're going to get as many people in here with as many different viewpoints as possible so we can share with each other and learn from each other. With that, I'll just go over a few logistical things about the webcast itself. You'll note that your microphones are muted. So if you want to ask any questions, you can use the Q&A button that I have circled there on the screen for you. This is the Zoom webinar platform. So if you click on the Q&A, you can enter questions. We will be glad to answer any questions that we have time to answer. If we don't get to answer any, or if you have questions you think of later and you'd like to email me directly, please do that. My email is listed there on the screen, mike.yost@cesmi.org. Our format is that we will spend the next about 18 minutes in a conversation between me and my guest, Tom, just a facilitated conversation between the two of us to get his viewpoint on what smart manufacturing looks like to him. If you're not familiar with the Zoom platform, you'll notice that I appear probably in a small window or a thumbnail somewhere on your screen. If you don't like that thumbnail being there, you can click on the thumbnails and you'll have options of how you can minimize or maximize or change the windows that you're seeing. Last point is that this session is being recorded. It will be posted online. So our goal is to continue the discussions, the dialogues online, and we'll do that by getting the webcast session posted as quickly as we can. So with that, we'll get me out of the way and get to our guest here today, Tom Comstock. Thanks, Tom, for turning on your video and joining us here. Just quickly for everybody, from a little bit of context perspective, Tom is part of LNS Research, and they are advisors and researchers in the industrial marketplace, very well proven and very knowledgeable on our space. And Tom has deep credibility and experience in the industry. As you can see, 35 plus years of experience in industrial manufacturing software. And he leads the LNS Research team's industrial transformation topic area. And so we've asked Tom to come in and really represent the expertise that he himself holds, as well as the folks that he engages in the marketplace around this topic area. So with that, Tom, welcome. Thank you for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. So we will start the way we start every time, and maybe just one slight difference. Start by asking you the question, what does smart manufacturing look like to you? I think it would do a lot of good, and we've prepared a couple of slides here for us to leverage. I think it would be good if we started by grounding everybody in what your definition of industrial transformation is, so we can then tie it to the context of smart manufacturing in that context.
Sounds great. If you go to the next slide, I'll try and answer the question there by the definition here. So at LNS Research, we spend all our time focusing on operations, manufacturing, and those kinds of things. So what I'm charged with studying and what LNS is focused in on is we call it industrial transformation. But Americans call it smart manufacturing, so I'm not surprised you guys are using that term here. Industry 4.0 is the phrase that the Germans use. More and more the IT vendors and the big consulting houses are talking about digital transformation. But I really think the definition we have here really ties all this together, and really it's the focus on trying to improve the operations, not with continuous improvement that everybody needs to do, everybody should be doing, but trying those things people are trying to do to get step change improvement, significant improvement, 10% reduction in manufacturing costs. And it's typically highly tied to using some new digital technologies. We're going to see it's more than that, but using digital technologies to create that step change improvement. So if we look at the diagram on the right, we're saying digital transformation is this big thing that's going on, but it also includes a whole bunch of stuff outside of manufacturing, such as, in the automotive industry, there's a lot of things about the autonomous car and capabilities for the consumer, but smart manufacturing and industrial transformation is what car manufacturers are doing in their supply chain to improve operations. And I think as Industry 4.0 was defined by the Germans and initially got going, it was all around the Internet of Things. And we're focused on the industrial Internet of Things, but as the diagram here is representing, it's much broader than that. So what LNS did is we went out and did a bunch of research. We did a real extensive global survey on what are companies doing around industrial transformation. We looked at their budget, their organization, the staffing, the scope, the technologies involved, the operational technologies and IT systems that people already had in place, and what they were trying to do to achieve that step change improvement. And what we found is that, as you can see on the left-hand side, this is a trend that's continuing to grow now, with 45% of companies having an active transformation program. Again, in the US, that'd be called smart manufacturing. In Europe, it's probably called Industry 4.0. And you can also see that the number of people number of corporations that are planning to grow, planning to engage, is also increasing. So the only downward trend on this list are the people that are not planning or have not already engaged in industrial transformation. And when we went out and looked at the marketplace, we found that there's some pretty significant differences between what leaders are doing, we call them IX leaders, for industrial transformation leaders, and everybody else. And what we specifically found is that 8% of companies are already reporting dramatic results against their programs, and another 20% say, we're not there yet, but we're really on a path to get there. So we called those 28% the leaders, and when we looked at their behavior, it was different. We found that they were doing better on their quality metrics, their new product introduction metrics, their manufacturing metrics, and that they were really doing things differently. So if you go to the next slide, I can show one area that just kind of talks to how they're doing it differently. And this goes back to that first diagram on the left-hand side. We went and asked about technologies. We asked about 14 general technologies, and then if they picked on that top left one, which is industrial Internet of Things technologies, we then asked them about that. What we found is that leaders were doing a lot more in terms of working with and engaging in these different technologies. So leaders were likely to be doing more, so that's the green bubbles here, often twice as likely to be doing any one of these technologies as the followers across a wide range of technologies. In fact, 13 of the 14, they were doing more. The only one that they weren't doing more was drones, which is, pretty specific to things like agriculture and mining. But you can see that smart manufacturing really requires you to be trying to use a lot of different technologies. So yes, it includes IIoT technologies, but it also includes augmented reality and virtual reality and 3D printing and intelligent wearables, and really trying to use an intelligent information management system. And then on the bottom row, it's also about upgrading your IT systems, your ERP, your enterprise resource planning system, or if you're in discrete manufacturing, your PLM system, your product lifecycle management and computer-aided design systems. but it's also about upgrading your OT, your MES systems, your automation systems, your distributed control systems. So you can see leaders are doing a lot of different technologies. And by the way, if you were doing IIoT, we then asked you about 13 of those, and they were more likely to be doing 13 out of 13. So in fact, the leaders were doing at least 5 of these different kinds of technologies to the followers that are only doing 2. So one of the key things we're finding in the data, so this isn't my opinion, this is what we're finding, is that if you're going to engage in smart manufacturing, and I use the word gonna because I'm going to come to that on the next slide, you really need to be thinking wide and use a wide angle lens to think about the different technologies you need to be using, and you need to be trying a lot of them. And a lot of that's because of the way the programs are structured. The budgets are run by the plants, not by corporate. So it's all being piloted at the corporate, but you got to get different solutions for different plants. On the right is our use case navigator for industrial transformation. We've identified so far 35 different use cases, and we'll be publishing a whole bunch of research about that, about which use cases have the most bang for the buck, or the easiest to engage and get return on. And what we're finding again is that leaders are doing a lot more. So if you go to the next slide, I can summarize what we found in terms of our best practices as we go. And the first one is, I kind of mean it as a joke, but it's very real. And that is, don't be a zombie. And what we found is that when we looked at all the data, we saw 4 organizational disconnects between this goal of industrial transformation, this goal of smart manufacturing, and the reality in the organization. First, budgets are very small. 6% of companies only have a 3-year budget of $100 million. Well, that sounds like a lot, but the demographics of the study were 40% were over $1 billion and 20% were over $5 billion. So these are big companies with small budgets because, again, it's the corporate, it's the pilot, and then the rollout's being funded by the plant. But there's no goal alignment to making sure smart manufacturing or industrial transformation is successful. All these companies are appointing chief digital officers, but they're not giving them any power in terms of budget or even leadership of the program. And most importantly, we'll come back to this a little bit later, they're not engaging the plants deeply. It's a corporate initiative, but the plants have to fund it. So what we believe is that a lot of companies are starting these programs because it's in the news, they feel they have to, maybe the board of directors is pushing them to it, and yet there's not a real commitment. And if there's not a real commitment, guess what? They're not in that 28%. They're in stagnation or failure. What we did find directly from the data, and I've already talked about the second one, is that smart manufacturing and industrial transformation is more than just this new hot industrial Internet of Things technology. It's about a whole range of technology. And that's really just one example of the next one, which is the power of more. That's our phrase for the fact that the single most powerful thing that came out of this study and 2 other studies, one on quality in smart manufacturing and a new one in terms of the use cases, is the power of more. Everybody is doing more. They have a bigger team, a bigger functional scope. They're involving both their suppliers and customers. They're using more applications. They're including more people on their teams. And in fact, they're even doing more with the data. The ones that are succeeding are the ones that are taking the data at the end of the process and making it available to everyone. The people that are following and or stuck are literally keeping it only in management hands. And that really relates to the 4th best practice, which is combine the top down and bottom up. 85% of executives, programs are run by executives at the very highest level, the board of directors, CEO, COO. And that's great because you've got to have top-down engagement. But what we found is you needed to have real engagement from the bottom up. The plants needed to be engaged. Leaders are engaging 13 of 19 business functions and have 17 of 19 different departments on the team. And I think this is one where really a lot of people that are thinking about smart manufacturing aren't engaging widely enough across their organization. The 5th one, if you haven't figured it out, is that it's not about the technology. Leaders are 31% more likely to be focused on business change and process change and 60% less likely to be using technology as a core to their overall program. And that leads us to the last one, which is build on a solid systems foundation. Leaders are 48% more likely to have best-in-class OT systems, MES, automation, SCADA, those kinds of things, and common systems across their plants. And they're 50% more likely to have best-in-class in terms of ERP and common business systems. So when we think of smart manufacturing, Mike, we really think about a pretty big program. If it's going to be successful, reaching a lot of different technologies, using a lot of different, reaching out across the organization, both in terms of scope and engaging the team, and really making sure that it uses the subject matter expertise of the plant. So it's not just a corporate project going forward. So I hope I've covered what you wanted me to cover, Mike. Maybe I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, no, you've covered a lot of ground and backed it up with a lot of good information. And I think for those that are viewing, I'll just back up in case anybody wanted to digest any of the numbers that you had up there on your previous slide. Yeah, a lot of things jump out to me from the points that you raised. One, essentially equating smart manufacturing to industrial transformation. I think that's a very powerful, reinforcement of the value of smart manufacturing. It also points to the challenge that we have in industry of so many things having commonality or the same names or things like that, and making it difficult for people to determine one thing from another. I guess one of the things that I wanted to drill into just quickly is the word transformation implies dramatic change, dramatic upside, right? New business models, new opportunities. But when you back that up with some of the things that you talked about as far as the behavior and the small budgets and the small pilots, our CEO talks all the time about our industry being stuck in pilot purgatory. Are people truly doing transformation through industrial transformation, or is it are they more looking at it and not yet truly stepping up and looking at it from a transformational perspective?
I think that's the $64 million question. And what I mean by that is, I think when we really look what a lot of companies are doing right now is they're engaging in this activity, I'll say because they have to. So take the example I gave of the chief digital officer. They're appointing these chief digital officers, and a manufacturer often gets somebody from Microsoft or Accenture, really talented people, but they don't really empower that person to drive forward. So I think there is, in fact, a real challenge as to whether people, corporations, are really as committed to this as it would seem by the fact that 45% say they're engaged. And I think you really got it with focusing in on that word transformation. I had a boss once tell me that the word transformation is not good. If you have a happy marriage, do you want to transform your marriage? Probably not. And that's really, I think, the challenge here. And that's why we use that word step change is it's hard to go do something significant. We're calling it industrial transformation partly to differentiate it with continuous improvement and all those kinds of things that need to happen in parallel and should be done in every manufacturer. But it isn't easy, and it isn't simple, and it isn't painless. That's why I think you need to have this engagement from both the top and the bottom. So, if you're thinking about getting in the smart manufacturing team, the first thing I would try and figure out is whether there's a real commitment to it in your corporation, or if they are just kind of trying to check off the boxes. I've had a number of different people say, hey, I'll see based on the budget and who they put on the team, whether the executives really care, or they're just, have a zombie program, a fake program,
right, going
on.
And one of the challenges that we face here at the Institute is aligning those types of objectives and that initiative to succeed as a 21st century competitor, build sustainable competitive advantage, and also doing it in a way that aligns with what's actually happening in the plants. So we want to work and make sure that there's a connection between the high-level strategy, transformational type of thinking and how you actually are executing and driving your plants. So, so Tom, I really, really appreciate it. And this time flies by, as I warned you that it would. So we are out of time here for this. I really appreciate the time. I'll give you one opportunity to close us out and just one summation, if you will, as far as if you're going to have one takeaway for folks about what smart manufacturing looks like to you, what would you offer up to everybody?
It looks like a challenge. So if you're going to do it smart, go wide, but engage the whole corporation.
Fantastic. I appreciate that very much. And speaking of engaging, I would offer up to everybody to please engage with us. I've offered up my email. Please send through questions that you have. Sign up to be a guest yourself. Get here and have your voice heard. Submit topics you'd like to hear us talk about. Give people the opportunity to talk about. And just let you know that on October 9th, we will have Jim Davis, who is the Vice Provost of IT and the Chief Academic Technology Officer at UCLA. He also is the Principal Investigator at CESMII, which means he is the official liaison between UCLA, CESMII, and the Department of Energy, our governmental sponsor. So look forward to seeing everybody back here in a few weeks when we welcome Jim in to join us. So thank you, everybody. Take care and have a great day.